Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Vastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti-Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vacharni Nirvishesha Sinyavani Vasataya Dasatani Om Agana Timarandasya Jana Jana Salakaya Jaksun Militanyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadanmayam Dadanti Svadadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagrajadam Sagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishikavitam Scha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagapate Gopisa Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vindavanishwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakapatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I believe we are in chapter 2 verse 13. Very important verse in our spreading of Krishna consciousness. Dehinosmin yata dehe kormaram yavaram jara dehinosmin yata dehe Kormaram yavanam jara Tata Dehantara Paptir Tata Dehantara Paptir Dirast Tatra Na Muchate Dirast Tatra Na Muchate Dehinosmin yata dehe Kormaram yavanam pajara Tata dehatara paptir Dirstatra namuchate Dehino of the embodied Asmin in this Yata as Dehe in the body Kormaram boyhood Yovanam youth Jara old age Tata similarly Dehantara of transference of the body Prapti achievement Dira the sober Tatra thereupon the never Muyati is deluded. Purport and translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Purport. Since every living entity is an individual soul, each is changing his body every moment manifesting sometimes as a child, sometimes as a youth, and sometimes as an old man. Yet the same spirit soul is there and does not undergo any change. This individual soul finally changes the body at death and transmigrates to another body. And since it is sure to have another body in the next birth, either material or spiritual, there is no cause for lamentation by Arjuna on account of death, neither for Bhishma or for Drona, for whom he was so much concerned. Rather, he should rejoice for their changing bodies from old to new ones, thereby rejuvenating their energy. Such changes of bodies account for varieties of enjoyment or suffering according to one's work in life. So Bhishma and Drona, being noble souls, were surely going to have spiritual bodies in the next life, or at least life in heavenly bodies for superior enjoyment of material existence. So in either case, there was no cause of lamentation. Any man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of the individual soul, the supersoul, and nature, both material and spiritual, is called Dhira, or a most sober man. Such a man is never deluded by the change of bodies. The Mayavadi theory of oneness of the spirit soul cannot be entertained on the ground that the spirit soul cannot be cut into pieces as fragmental portions. Such cutting into different individual souls would make the supreme cleavable or changeable against the principle of the supreme souls being unchangeable. As confirmed in the Gita, the fragmental portions of the Supreme exist eternally, Sanatan, and are called Jara. That is, they have a tendency to fall down into a material nature. These fragmental portions are eternally so, and even after liberation, the individual soul remains the same, fragmental. But once liberated, he lives an eternal life in bliss and knowledge with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The theory of reflection can be applied to the super soul, who is present in each and every individual body and is known as Paramatma. He is different from the individual living entity. When the sky is reflected in water, the reflection represents both the sun and the moon and the stars also. The stars can be compared to the living entities and the sun or the moon to the Supreme Lord. The individual fragmental spirit soul is represented by Arjuna, and the Supreme Soul is the personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. They are not on the same level, as it will be apparent in the beginning of the 4th chapter. If Arjuna is on the same level with Krishna, and Krishna is not superior to Arjuna, then the relationship of instructor and instructed becomes meaningless. If both of them are deluded by the illusory energy Maya, then there is no need of one becoming the instructor and the other the instructed. Such instruction would be useless because in the clutches of Maya, no one can be an authoritative instructor. Under the circumstances, it is admitted that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord, superior in position to the living entity, Arjuna, who is a forgetful and deluded soul by Maya. Jai. So, as we have here in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, Arjuna is going through his dark night of the soul. He's having this very difficult time, and he turns to Krishna, his dear friend, and he asks him for help. And the thing that Krishna says to him is, he says, "How have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life. They lead not to higher planets, but to infamy. O son of Pritha, I do not yield to this degrading potence. Do not yield to this degrading impotence. It does not become you. Give up such petty weakness of heart and arise." So we understand that Arjuna came from a very elevated family. His father was the emperor of the world. He was raised with all the proper breeding, all the proper education, all the proper association. So he knew better. But we also understand from Srila Prabhupada that he had this state of mind due to the mercy of the Supreme Lord, so that Krishna could speak Bhagavad-Gita for our benefit. Because unfortunately, we don't have that breeding, we don't have that education. And we would know nothing about Bhagavad-Gita if it wasn't for the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. So this text 13, as the embodied soul continually passes from this body, from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. This is such a great verse, especially if you're a preacher, especially if you're in the public and you're trying to explain Krishna consciousness, because it explains a perfect truth very simply. Who hasn't had the experience of what their bodies were like when they were 8 years old? You can remember. You can remember what your desires were, what your fears were, what you could do, what you couldn't do. You could remember your state of consciousness. And you can also remember it was a very different, it was almost like another life. So this is interesting, and it's such a simple truth, and it's such a great way to explain it to somebody who doesn't have this understanding. This is a good way to identify the core self, the self that we all have in each of these bodies as we're growing up. We used to use this example when we did programs in schools, and we'd ask somebody to identify, where are you? And we'd say, is that hand you? And they say, yeah. And we say, no, that's your hand, but it's not you. If we cut that hand off, are you still there? Yeah. So it's really a great way, even for children, to get a concept of not being this material body. So this is Krishna's first instruction to Arjuna. And this is a basis of spiritual life. We need to understand we're not these material bodies. These material bodies are the cause of all our suffering because of our attachment and because of our attachment to the concept of misidentifying with this material body. And he mentions Drona and Bhishma here, which is interesting, because their change of bodies is for their benefit. They're old men by this time. You know, they're over 100, right? Krishna was close to 100, so they had to be much older. And they're tired. They're tired of this material world. They're tired of all the suffering. And they've lived such elevated lives. They'll go back in the spiritual sky or to heavenly planet at worst. So there's no cause of lamentation for the loss of that body. And Krishna is explaining that to Arjuna here. And this is the beginning of understanding of spiritual life, how we're not these bodies. It's the most important. Yogis, they try to reach this understanding through so much time, meditating in the forest, and trying to understand who they are. And they come to the point where they're in the heart. And then they come to the point that, oh, the Lord is also in the heart. But for us, this knowledge is so easily accessible due to Bhagavad-Gita and due to Srila Prabhupada sharing this with us in this way. So many other commentators on the Bhagavad-Gita, they try to say that, yes, we are all God. And Srila Prabhupada immediately addresses that too here, is that this is another point where how can God be divided into little pieces? He's not divided into little pieces and then they come back together. No, because the spirit cannot be divided, cannot be separated like that. But we're all eternal fragmental parts. We're individually separated. But we can, again, attach ourselves through Krishna consciousness, through chanting Hare Krishna, through performing devotional service. So this process, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, there's offering us a very practical way of understanding these spiritual facts and these spiritual truths. Simple truths. but not easily understood by everybody. Sometimes, Prabhupada was saying, sometimes, you can try to explain and people will not be able to understand. And so just give them prasadam. Because prasadam is so powerful, it works from the inside out. Right? So Dehinosmin, embodiment. The embodiment, Srila Prabhupada describes in one point that this is like renting a house. If we rent a house and we live in the house, we rent a house according to our means, right? We have so much money, we can afford to have so much of a house. So that's like we're renting this body, it's according to our karma and our desires. And so eventually this house will fall apart and we'll have to move. And that's similarly with this body. So there was a great Greek philosopher, Heraclitus, and he says, you cannot stand in the same river, in the same place twice, because the river is always moving. And similarly, things are always changing in this material world. This material body is changing. With a child, you can see it so quickly, right? They grow up so quickly. You could measure them from day to day and watch their progress grow. But have you ever seen a parent cry because their child got to be 6 feet tall? They changed their body, right? They were this sweet little baby, and now they're a 6 foot tall man. Does a parent cry? No. But if they leave that body, they do cry. And that's the thing, is that we have to understand that even though they leave the body, they don't die. Even though Drona and Bhishma, they're going to leave their bodies. There's no reason to cry. They're not dying. They're eternal. We're always eternal. It's interesting because Lord Chaitanya, he was, there was civil disobedience way back then too. It's not a new thing. In fact, Lord Chaitanya used civil disobedience. The Shan Kazi, he had decided that there shouldn't be any Sankirtan. Navadvip, before Lord Chaitanya appeared, was a very degraded place. People had very little understanding of spiritual life. But after he came, and he became such an exalted personality, and he was still a boy, so many people were following him. And so they were having Sankirtan. But this Kazi, he decided, no more Sankirtan, and he broke a mridanga. So Lord Chaitanya, he gathered up all his followers, hundreds of thousands of people, hundreds and hundreds of mridangas, and they went to the Kazi's house, big civil disobedience. And they're having a very loud kirtan, and Lord Chaitanya came to talk to the Kazi. Of course, the Kazi was a little, a government becomes concerned when the citizens start to rebel. We've seen this in history so many times. When there's demonstrations by the people, the government's afraid. Sometimes they even turn on their own people. But the Kazi, he was afraid, so he was concerned. So he had Lord Chaitanya come in, and he sat with him. And he told Kazi, the Kazi told Lord Chaitanya, says, your uncle, your father's like my uncle. I used to call him Chacha. Chacha means uncle in Mohammedanism, or in their language. And I said, so you're like my nephew. So he tried to make this friendly with him. So Lord Chaitanya said, yes. But why is it in your religion you're eating your mother and father? Right off, he starts off like this. Why are you eating your mother and father? And the Kazi says, what do you mean? I don't eat my mother and father. He says, you drink cow's milk, but you eat the cow. You take the work from the bull, but you eat the bull. This is like your father. He's providing for you. The cow is like your mother. She's providing milk for you. So they had this very nice discussion. And the Kazi, he comes back and he says, but you kill the cow. You have cow sacrifice. You offer it in a sacrifice. And Lord Chaitanya said, but the cow gets a new body. Of course, this sacrifice is not allowed in Kali Yuga any longer, because the Brahmins do not have the ability to chant these mantras to actually give the cow or the horse that new, renewed body. So this argument was used by Lord Chaitanya also, how we're not these bodies, but the body can be renewed. It can be renewed in a different body. Like when we take a rental, we're going to move to a different rental when this rental's finished. And the place will be made out of the same thing. It'll be made out of some stone and some wood and some glass. It'll be an apartment or a house, whatever, according to our means. And if money is coming to us nicely, we may choose to move up to a better apartment. And so that's this, just like having this body for this temporary time. So there's no reason for lamentation for this for his grandfather Bhishma, or for Drona. And similarly, it's like that story that Srila Prabhupada says that a brahmachari, he says, don't live. Right? He tells the brahmachari, don't live, because he's so saintly, he's performing austerity, and so he says, you can die now and receive the benefits of all your austerities. Whereas for a son of a king, don't die. He tells him, don't die, because if you die, you've been living, enjoying your senses uncontrollably. If you die now, you'll have to suffer. And then for a butcher, never die. Never die to a butcher, because there's such a terrible life waiting for him afterwards. And for a devotee, you may live or you may die, because it's the same, because the devotee is engaged in devotional service wherever they may be, whatever body they take. And that's the second part of spiritual life that's so important. The first part is that we're not these material bodies, but the second part, the my bodies completely miss. And that's that we're Nitya Siddha Krishna Das. We're the eternal servants of Krishna. And that's the bliss, that's the mercy, is being engaged in devotional service. So Bhagavad-Gita gives us these simple truths in a way that we can understand and share. And Srila Prabhupada once said, because this material body, we all become challenges in remembering we're not this material body. Because we've been thinking we've been this material body since time immemorial. And it's kind of interesting, because we've been traveling since time immemorial in so many different bodies, right? And each of those bodies, we thought we were that body. It could be a little bug or a big whale, or whatever it was. We thought we were that body, and we were trying to enjoy in that body in whatever way those senses in that body were dictating. And so this illusion, this consciousness that we think we're this body, we've been thinking this way since time immemorial. So now is sometimes challenging to give up that thought. Of course, the best way is to keep chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But even then, it's sometimes challenging. So we keep on chanting. And Srila Prabhupada says that taking shelter of Mukunda is the only way to relieve the fatigue of misidentifying with this material body. You know, it's kind of interesting. As in the Srimad Bhagavatam and in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a couple of instances when different souls were brought back. One was the son of King Chitraketu. Remember him? He just wanted a son so badly, and he tried so many different things. He even had 1,000,000 wives, and still he could not have one son. Finally, he was given a benediction by a sage, Angira, and he had this beautiful son, and he was so happy, so elated. But the wives became a little envious. Very envious, and they killed the son. And he knew no greater grief, right? No greater grief. So then Narada Muni came back with Angira, and they brought back the son to life. This is a beautiful play that was done in Mayapur last year. It's an incredible play. And so this child, he sits back up and he says, they said, your mother and father want you here. He says, which mother and father? I've had so many mothers and fathers. And he started remembering all the births he's taken. He says, which ones? But I don't want to come back. Right? So he starts relating how the soul is traveling. Also, there was in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, remember Shivas Thakur's son died during a kirtan. And the women were lamenting so strongly. And he was like, shh, we don't want to disturb Lord Chaitanya. But Lord Chaitanya came in and said, what's going on? Something's happening. And he learned. So he brought the child back to life. And the child again, he says, I don't want to come back. I want to go back to the spiritual sky. I don't want to stay in this material world. And just recently we read in about King Nimi, right? They brought him back to life. And he didn't want to be back here either. He preferred a spiritual body. I think this helps us give some insight. On the other hand, you have Bali Maharaj. He also was killed, and they were able to bring him back to life, and he had no regrets about coming back because he did not take a spiritual body. And then Ajamil came very close to the Yamadutas taking him away, but simply because he was calling Narayan. The Vishnudus came and saved him. And so he was able to have a chance to live his life in a proper way. And so we all have this great benediction, this opportunity to live our lives in a very saintly way, in a very blessed way. And it's not only is it blessed for our next life, but it's blessed for this life too. Because when we have this consciousness, I'm not this material body, and we act on that consciousness, it relieves us of so much of the suffering that comes along with the material body. So I thought maybe we could open it up for some discussion here. Any questions or reflections or additions? Yes, Prabhu.
We understand as a devotee that we have to go back to body. But a non-devotee doesn't know all these things. So if you tell him also that you will go back home to body, he doesn't want to agree it. Wherever I'm enjoying, I don't know after this life where I'm going. Also Prabhupada asked some scientist, he said, what is wrong if I get dog body or anything?
Yeah.
So many times we speak to the people, but they say, what is the use after death, where we are going, we do not know. And neither we are interested to know where I am going. But we tell you that we have taken 84,000 spices of life and this one, but we don't remember everything. And I told this remembrance and forgiveness is given by Krishna.
Mm-hmm.
So if you remember that you were a snake or you were a rat or you were a cat, then you will think and you will die immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So better this is Krishna, whatever is given to you, remembrance and forgiveness, that you should be thankful for Krishna. But they don't understand this thing. So we try to make them understand that you are not this body and this thing. Oh, I am this body, I am enjoying this body, I am doing everything. So these things are with the materialist people, but spiritual people, they can understand that
right.
we chant Hare Krishna, we are giving the food to the soul and soul will get benefit. But the materialist people, they don't understand.
You're right, yeah.
We try to make them understand, but still they cannot understand.
Yeah.
So what is the process that we can give them that they can understand very easily?
Well, we have to find a way to get them attracted, because we can't really make anybody grow spiritually. We can't even make ourselves grow spiritually without the mercy of Lord Nityananda. So we need to just try to make this process as attractive as possible, and find, maybe it's just prasadam is the only thing they can partake in. Yes, Prabhu.
Sri Radhe, you are the person who brought me here. So how you can say that?
So you see, There's been some benefit. Actually, Prabhupada says the devotees are out there. People are out there. They just don't know where to go. And when we hear about how people come to Krishna consciousness, it's kind of interesting because so many people, they did not like the Hare Krishnas when they first saw them. They're very strange, those Hare Krishnas. I actually felt that way too. I felt I had to avoid them. They were just too odd. I crossed the street. When I saw them on one side, I'd go to the other side. And but people are out there. Devotees are out there looking for Krishna. We just have to show up. Give them a book. Give them a book. Invite them to the temple. Invite them to take prasadam. Invite him to chant Hare Krishna.
I think you have worked only 2 months, I think. He worked only 2 months ago. He brought me here.
I gave him personal and asked him to come here.
See, so you're performing everything so perfectly.
Krishna is helping everyone.
That's wonderful attitude. Is that we're the servant of everyone. Yes, dasan dasa. Jai, thank you for your service. Anyone else, please? Yes.
Thank you for your lecture. In the verse, it's mentioned that we exist eternally.
Speak a little louder, Prabhu.
We exist eternally. That means soul is eternal, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
But we have tendency to fall down. That means that we evolve in the spiritual world.
Yes.
But for me, it's very difficult to understand, even if we have free will to choose in the spiritual world, why we react in the way that we have to fall down.
Good question. Very good question. It's because of our attachment to this material body and to the material concepts of this body. We're thinking that this enjoyment, this temporary enjoyment, is going to give us more pleasure than things that'll give us eternal enjoyment. And let me break that down in a little simpler term. For example, the instruction is given us that we should always only eat prasadam, right? And then that's very easy. That's why devotees like to put themselves in a situation where we're surrounded by devotees all the time, because then that becomes very easy. But if you're out in the world, and you're visiting your family and they're offering you a cookie or something, and you're hungry and it's quick, it's easy, and you didn't even think about offering it to Krishna, that's a little tiny fall down, but it's going to have an effect. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be an effect on your spiritual consciousness, eating non-prasadam. So, and there's so many ways that we're affected. For example, just getting up and coming to the morning program. So many times we try to wake up in the morning and the mode of ignorance is so strong, it's pulling us back into the bed. Oh, it's too cold, it's foggy, it's wet, whatever reasons, Oh, my head hurts, And I'm not saying every time you should get up, especially if you have some physical difficulty. That's another issue. But if you're in physically good shape and you know the difference, we all know individually what the situation is. It's just these challenges to fight the material body, to take a higher taste, to take a higher step there. So the inclination is to enjoy this material body, and this material body does not want to let go of that idea, and so it will constantly come after us in different ways, and sometimes the ways are so subtle we don't even see it happening. It could be just through the ego, Perhaps maybe somebody said something that upset us a little bit. And that could be, it's just the false ego is telling us, well, they shouldn't be talking to me that way. Don't they know who I am? And then, but from there, the ego can make us, be offensive back, or maybe even just do something that's not very spiritually intelligent. So it's just that we have to be aware all the time that, the material energy is material energy is job is to make sure that nobody goes back to Krishna who is not 100% pure and sure that that's all they want. Because there's nobody in the spiritual sky who's lusty or greedy or envious. There's nobody up there like that. So we have to clear those things out of our hearts before we can go. It's not easy. It's a long process. That's why sometimes we just wonder, like, why is this taking so long? And then actually maybe that's just a little signal from Krishna that, okay, maybe we need to add a little more austerity or a little more chanting or a little more devotional service or a little more something to our lives to make it a little more spiritual. Because if we're feeling like, I'm not getting anywhere in this, then maybe there's something we need to do to be a little more loving to the Supreme Lord. Find some way to offer a little more love. Anyone else? Yes, Prabhu.
I'm just wondering, is there a difference between... Is there a difference between if someone's died lamenting because their body is gone and lamenting because the soul has gone somewhere else and you missed them?
Say this again.
Like, there's lamenting because the body has been destroyed, and lamenting because you would like to be able to associate with that person still. So like if Arjuna was to kill Drona and Bhishma, you could say, well, they're going to get a better situation and they're going to be okay.
Right.
But Arjuna might still want to be able to talk with
Ah,
and Bhishma and
yeah.
associate with them.
When you love somebody. Now, the question is it natural for Arjuna to feel some separation from Bhishma? Should he kill him, he'd be gone. He wouldn't be able to associate with him. Right? Is that your question? Okay. That's a good question. And it's natural. This is a point for argument, Prabhupada says. This a particular situation is a point for argument. But at the same time, think about it. I mean, we've seen this with our parents maybe before they passed. Yours are probably still younger, but I know when my grandmother she was 94, and her body was such a miserable vehicle at that point. It was just so awful. And when she passed, everybody thought, well, what a blessing that she's finally, and people who weren't even devotees were thinking like that. Oh, this is a blessing. Yes, we'll miss her because she was a very sweet, loving soul. But out of love for her, we're happy to see that she's relieved of that painful situation. So, actually, if we study the Mahabharata and we see that Bhishma was in a very awkward situation. He was a great devotee, undoubtedly, great soul. But he was now in the camp of the Kurus, and he was beholding to them because he had some vow or something that he'd taken that he would serve whoever was on the throne at that time. But the way Duryodhana got on the throne was in such a devious, evil way. He had no right to it. So the situation was all convoluted. It was wrong. But he just had found himself on the wrong side of the war. So it was a blessing for him to leave that situation. A blessing. Okay?
Hare Krishna. So how can we help those, you just mentioned your grandmother. Like my father also lived some 5 years back. That time I was not much into touch with devotees. I couldn't preach to him.
Right.
Now how can we help those souls?
Oh, there's so many ways. You know, this is one of the blessings about being a devotee, is we know more about dying than the materialists know about living. It's true, right? And it's just so wonderful. There's so many things we can do that we can, bring flowers, just set them around. We can bring, of course, depending on what they can eat, but even maha water. There's so many things we can do. We can sing bhajans to them. They don't. A friend of mine's mother did not like her being a Hare Krishna, and when she was dying, she was unconscious, and she would go in and chant to her. And she said she could almost see her saying, don't you chant like that to me. But she was out, she was breathing, but she wasn't conscious. She just says, oh no, I'm going to chant. And she'd sprinkle her with some Jamuna water and things like that, So parents are so blessed. Prabhupada said that your parents may not appreciate that you're a devotee now, maybe not able to understand it, but when they die, they'll really appreciate your sacrifices in becoming a devotee. There was a Purva, a god brother of mine, he's writing a cookbook for quantity cooking. Look forward to seeing this. But he said when his mother died, he had a dream that she was being carried away by these two heavenly-looking beings and waving to him. And it was just so satisfying to him to hear that dream. That was just sweet. But yeah, devotees know so much about dying, and they're able to help so much in the passing of this material body, whereas other people they don't know what's happening to their loved ones. But a devotee knows, what's important, what should be there at the time of death, hearing and chanting, taking prasad.
While they are passing, we can help in these ways, and if they have passed, like long back.
They pass and go back. We could just chant, I know a very nice devotee. He does every year on his mother's birthday. He puts their picture on the altar and he offers some prasadam and he does some prayers for him. You could do that too, because but it says that that devotee doesn't have to do extra sacrifice for their family, because Krishna takes care of the family. He takes care of everything for a devotee. So we don't have to do that, but if you have some sentiment in your heart, it may be, you could do that. Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. If someone is dying and someone doesn't want to leave his body, keep his body and keep on chanting in this one, remembering God, Lord, that I want my mother back. So he doesn't allow anyone to take his mother's body, and he is praying for several days, and after 7 days or something, it gets alive. So what do you say about that one?
That's a wild one. Actually, Bhadayananda Maharaj, he had told me a story. It's similar to this, and it was a devotee of Srila Bhakti-Siddhanta who had left the mat and had lived a degraded life, and he died, and he found himself in the court of Yamaraj. And Yamaraj called him up and said, "Who is your spiritual master?" And he just immediately thought Srila Bhakti-Siddhanta Maharaj. And immediately he was sent back to his material body, which was lying on a funeral pile. And they were just about to light it. Isn't that wild? And then he went back to the mat and he surrendered and lived a very nice life for the remainder of his life. But I don't know, that would seem like a long time for a dead body to be, I'm not a medical scientist, but that's, maybe, I don't know.
The person was giving rose water and making the body doesn't smell anything, so he was putting some perfumes and this one, And continuously was praying 7 days, just like Parishad Maharaj, he was listening 7 days, and this person also 7 days continue, he never slept, he never went anywhere for passing urine or passing stone, he was just continuously praying, and this prayer.
I'm surprised he didn't die.
The Lord, my prayers was heard by him, and my mother became alive. And his mother was disabled. When she was alive, she could not walk, she was just crawling like a child.
I don't know. I really can't comment on that. Beyond my expertise.
She lived for maybe a couple of months or a couple of years, then after that she
Well, there's so many mysteries to this world. Jai, we should probably end here. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories.